But first, the latest proposed changes to what we teach our children. Changes to the national curriculum that have been recommended by the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority. And we do need changes. I mean, we keep spending billions more on education, yet keep seeing standards fall compared to, say, China. And looking at these proposed changes, spare us. I ask again, why is it that radicals seem in charge of deciding what gets taught and liberal politicians sit by and do nothing? True, some of these changes sound okay, getting rid of the clutter, focusing more on basics, good. But as always, you have to watch out for the ideology being smuggled in. The hot button issues of the left, and right now there's nothing hotter than race. Sure enough. True, I saw at first something quite positive. At the moment, children have to get Aboriginal perspectives taught in every subject area. Can you believe that? How do you do that with maths or physics? The idea was just stupid. So the recommendation is to be realistic and limit that Aboriginal teaching to the social sciences, things like history. Good. But the deeper you look into these changes, the worse it gets. In English, texts by Indigenous authors will be promoted. Why? How many great books by Indigenous authors are there? You might argue Kim Scott, say, but the list does run out pretty fast, to be blunt, which is, of course, one reason why a Bruce Pascoe gets such a promotion in schools as an Aboriginal writer, even though every one of his ancestors is of British descent, at least according to genealogical records. And it's also why Wildcat Falling was taught in so many schools as a standard Aboriginal text until its author, Colin Johnson, turned out not to be Aboriginal at all. Listen, if a novel is good, written beautifully, making an impact, our children should study it, yes. But studying it just because the author identifies as Aboriginal and studying it ahead of masterpieces of English from Charles Dickens, George Orwell, Toni Morrison, if you want a black writer, whatever, that is dumbing down the curriculum. That's one issue. But this curriculum authority goes further. It says the terms Aboriginal and Indigenous got to be replaced in the classroom. No more Aboriginal. You must say First Nations Australians or Australian First Nations peoples instead. The word order hardly matters. But you see the politics here. If you say Aboriginal, that simply means, member of the Aboriginal tribes of Australia. It's pure anthropology. No agenda. But telling children, no, these are actually First Nations Australians, that's politics. And it's also dishonest. It's saying, falsely, that Aboriginal tribes actually form nations. It's not true. And it stresses they were here first. So we've got a ranking now. And this is actually taught to help push the argument and Labor's agenda, the Greens' agenda, that when you have one nation invaded by another nation, we need a treaty. And our classrooms are just being prepped here for race politics. And I'm not jumping at shadows, exaggerating, because this proposal also complains that children aren't taught that the first peoples of Australia experienced colonisation as invasion. And it says they aren't taught at the moment, and should be, that Australia is home to the world's oldest continuing culture, which actually is not necessarily that great. Because another way of putting that is that Aboriginal culture did not actually change, advance, develop for 60,000 years. Do you really want to teach that? Well, turns out absolutely not. Because the curriculum authority suggests, almost like they've read Bruce Pascoe's Dark Emu fantasy, already being taught in schools as history, about Aborigines being not hunter-gatherers, farmers, living in big towns of 1,000 people. And they complain that schools do not showcase the sophisticated political, economic and social organisation systems of the first peoples of Australia. Like there were governments around and all that. That strikes me as an attempt to make ancient hunter-gathering societies look far more sophisticated than they actually were. This is in fact the Pascoe agenda, the Pascoe invention. It is not teaching history. It is teaching children propaganda, political propaganda, race propaganda. And to make room for this propaganda, primary school children will be taught more of that, but less of critical moments in Western civilization. They're not going to be taught about the significance of Bastille Day, France, the French Revolution, or the reason that Americans have Independence Day. The kind of information they actually need to be citizens of the world conversant in Western civilization. Instead, race propaganda coming to a classroom near you